During the Roaring '20s, Chicago had become one of the largest centers for mafia activity in the United States. Following the ratification of the 18th Amendment, Prohibition led to the rise of bootlegging, giving many gangs a way to make money and connections in their cities. These crime bosses would protect their businesses, interests, and allies through any means necessary. Intimidation, bribes, and most notably, execution. On the morning of February 14, 1929, 7 men were murdered at the garage of 2122 North Clark Street in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago's North Side. They were shot by 4 men using weapons like 2 Tommy guns. 2 of the shooters were wearing police outfits, while the others wore suits, ties, overcoats, and hats. Witnesses saw the men in police uniforms leading the other men at gunpoint out of the garage after the shooting. The victims included 5 members of George Bugs Moran's Northside Gang. Moran's second-in-command and brother-in-law, Albert Kechlik, was killed along with Adam Heer, the gang's bookkeeper and business manager, Albert Wanshank, who managed several cleaning and dyeing operations for Moran, and gang enforcers Frank Gusenberg and Peter Gusenberg. 2 associates were shot. Reinhard H. Strimmer, a former optician turned gambler and gang associate, and John May, an occasional mechanic from the Marine gang. Officers arrived at the scene of the murder to find that Frank Gusenberg was still alive despite having sustained 14 bullet wounds. As he was taken to the hospital, he was questioned by officers by asking who caused the shooting. Gusenberg reportedly said, quote, "I won't talk. For God's sake, get me to a hospital," end quote. Frank Gusenberg would die 3 hours later. The massacre was an attempt to murder Bugs Moran, the head of the Northside Gang. Moran was one of the 2 biggest gang heads in Chicago, along with Al Capone, co-founder and head of the Chicago Alpha. The massacre set out a public outcry, which was a big problem for all mob bosses. Now, let us enter theory time. The first theory is that it was just some random gang. The second and final theory is that the head of the Chicago suit, Al Capone, was behind the murder. It has been universally accepted by people that the massacre was a hit by Al Capone's organization in order to get more power in a protracted turf war between the 2 gangs. It was concluded that the 2 uniformed officers involved in the shooting were imposters. And as a reminder, the main target that morning was Bugs Moran, who was one of the biggest Chicago gang heads, along with Capone. 3 years prior, in 1926, Al Capone was behind the death of Jaime Weiss, the original Northside Gang leader, in 1926. Weiss was machine gunned down in a street by the men of Al Capone. Bugs Moran was supposed to be at the meeting at the garage where the shooting took place to supposedly finalize the purchase of a shipment of Canadian whiskey, which was stolen. Moran had backed out for a little bit when he noticed an officer in a police car slowly driving around. Moran and some of his men had gone to a nearby coffee shop to figure out what to do next. According to the gangster himself, Al Capone was at his Florida home at the time of the crime. Al Capone was never officially convicted for the massacre. In conclusion, the weapons used in the massacre were recovered, but no one would be charged. Soon after the massacre, Moran had lost a good amount of his top men, and Moran would fade into obscurity. Moran died from lung cancer in 1957 as a man who went from the top heads of Chicago gangs to penniless.